Okay, let me see if I can get this connected. So today, what we're going to do is just basically jump in and start looking at more navigation stuff, basically. How many of you guys were able to get through yesterday's stuff? Yeah? Including Barb? You got through Barb? Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, and that reading from yesterday, the big thing on that is going to be, you know, just all of the acronyms. I mean, the thing is kind of going forward too, you're going to realize that our world is full of just hundreds of different acronyms. Everything has an acronym. And so just get used to seeing that and just kind of know that, you know, you've got to start learning kind of what all these acronyms are. It's not like, you know, we're not going to like do any like acronym tests or anything like that, but you're just, you know, by force really, you're going to start seeing all of the different acronyms, and, you know, you're going to kind of be blown away. Like things that shouldn't have an acronym have acronyms just for the sake of having acronyms for whatever reason. So let me see if I can get into the right one here. It's day 4. Today is day 5. Okay. Guess I should turn on my screen. There too. No, it's too far away. May need to move closer to that thing. Stand by for 1 second.
That's pretty cool.
It works, huh?
It's way better.
Didn't even have to stand up. Okay. Now let's see if we can connect.
I didn't stage that at all.
There we go.
I just looked at it and want to see a funny picture for it? Of course I do.
It's saying it couldn't connect.
Did he already get through his whole ball of yards? What? Did he already destroy that yard? Crystal says, I feel like those of us not in class should be receiving a verbal description of what is happening visually. So Crystal, he couldn't reach the outlet, and so he was sitting in his wheelie chair, but his desk's on wheels too, so then at the same time his desk and his chair start moving down the floor closer to the outlet.
It was because I couldn't get the laptop to connect to the TV. And I still can't get it to connect. You can probably see that on your screen though. I don't know what I have to do. I mean, it says that it's connecting. Seriously, come on. Just need to turn it off. Great. Well, I'm not sure why that's not connecting, but it's annoying.
Yeah, Matt, you can just verify it.
Well, that's what this is supposed to be doing. Because this is just airplane it to the...
So it's worked like every other time.
I know. Let's see if I get it even closer. I'm going to have to sit like this, though. I don't know why it's not doing that.
Do you have an HDMI port on your computer?
I see a bunch of cords in the corner over there. I was wondering if there's in that box.
That's what I was gonna check.
You can just HDMI plug it in.
Give it a try. If not, I know that there all seem to be like power cords. Some computers.
Yeah.
I know there was one in that other class. Actually.
I think Crystal just called you lazy.
She's all full of talk when she ain't here, huh?
Yeah.
She forgot.
Doesn't talk this much in class.
I might be kind of rude for everything she said.
She says, way to sell me out.
Yeah, sure there is one. But I know I saw a cord over here.
I need a break already. Are we in 600 or 16?
I'm cheating my time on my military time.
You made fun of me about that a couple months ago.
I have to be doing this every time.
Oh, that makes me nervous. Excuse me?
We put by TVS this summer. Remember, you wouldn't turn on, no, it wouldn't turn on, you can get this.
Maybe that was more good.
That's you.
Did you hear
Turn
about,
Chucky.
Could you hear from your side of the room when Wendy called IP yesterday?
Yeah, and he's like, I pushed the power button.
Yeah.
Like, you just push it in. Why did I think of that?
officially moved all the way across the room.
Oh, I thought we were gonna need to start back here again.
The back little corner now.
Now watch, it's going to be on the far side, of course. Okay. Let's just make sure that this... Sorry for the delay, everyone. I selected that, didn't I?
Might be making that too though.
Better not be.
Oh!
Yay.
100,000 on the whole time.
No. I'm pretty sure I didn't use this cord the last couple of times. It should, because the input, when you just airplay it, it just picks it up. Like, you saw how I was saying it was trying to connect. Anyway, okay, well, we are here, done with that. So today we're going to take a look at all of the different charts. We're going to start looking at VFR charts, IFR charts, low en route charts. These are all just the basic charts that we look at when we do flight planning. So, well, when we do manual flight planning, I should say. So I'm going to introduce you guys to a program that we're going to be using, actually just a website, I should say, that we're going to be using a lot, especially when you do manual flight planning. So those of you guys that are on a computer, go to www.skyvector.com.
Cool.
So this website, it is a pretty cool website. All of these, what you basically are seeing here on the screen is, this is what's called a high en route navigational chart. So a lot of this stuff that you see right now doesn't really make sense, probably, unless you have, your pilot's license or your, commercial license. But I'm going to kind of flip through these charts. We're going to get to know exactly what we're looking at here today. So I'm going to start off by looking at the World of Vfr chart here. So if I zoom out far enough, at this level here, you can obviously tell that we're looking at the continental United States. And what this is just kind of a map. Obviously you can see the different terrain, the mountains, things like that. You can see, different, if I zoom in, you can see, yellow areas of, indicating areas of, cities and things like that. All of these maps, what they're actually showing us, though, are different airspaces. They're showing us navigational aids, which are called, the primary navigational aid that we look at on this are called VORs. And you'll learn all about what those are. But navigational aids, has anybody, I'm sure most of you guys have probably been driving along like a freeway and you just see like some random like spaceship looking thing. Like if you're ever driving from here to Vegas, just past Mesquite, There's off to the left, well, I should say off to the south side of the freeway, there is a kind of a round, like a little white dome looking thing. Yeah, that is a navigational aid. That is a VOR.
Wow, you've answered so many questions from my childhood.
Now it's all making sense, huh? So
Is that the same as an Omni?
yeah, like the omnidirectional frequency. Yeah, that's part of what VOR stands for, actually.
Okay.
So those are what we call ground-based navigational aids, but those are used by airplanes, and they're up in the air, obviously, picking up that frequency that's sent out from those little ground stations. And those help planes kind of know where they're at and help them stay on course. Let me see if I can bring up just a picture, just for those that don't know what we're looking at here. The images. It's going to be a little one. Find one that's high quality. This one's kind of bigger. You guys see that? Good. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. They have mostly they're generally kind of the same shape. Sometimes they have a few more little things around the bottom and stuff like that. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. This is the thing I'm talking about that's down there just outside of Mesquite. But you can see them all over the place. Like out at the airport, there's one. Just on the south end of the runway here in St. George, there's one. That's the St. George VOR. But they're usually at or near airports, or sometimes you just see them like out in the middle of, like the desert, like that one on the way to Vegas. And that's just one that's actually on like an airway. So when you think of planes flying around, it's kind of similar. They kind of fly around in a similar way, kind of like how we drive on roads and things like that. Up in the air, they have what are called airways. And most planes, especially when you get into the IFR, the instrument, flight rule environment, most planes that are flying cross country or wherever they're going are following different little airways that are pre-prescribed that ATC likes to keep traffic. Like if you're going from LA to Salt Lake City as an example, they have a main airway, and you kind of think of it just like a freeway, like we've got I-15 that basically goes LA to Salt Lake. Well, they kind of have the equivalent of an airway straight above us that they put most of the planes on that go on that same route, or really anything from Southern California to like northern Utah goes kind of on this same airway. And so there's all different kinds of airways though. There's lower level ones that are for the smaller planes that are flying low to the ground. Those are called Victor Airways. Then there's the higher up ones that are 18,000 feet and above. Those are called Jet Airways. And then there's some other ones that are called Q routes or Q Airways. Those are still for jets and stuff, but they're for different types of technology that they fly with, GPS, RNAV type technology, which we'll learn about. But anyway, so first thing to understand is that there's all these different airways all across, really everywhere, all over the world that planes fly along these airways. And along those airways, you have those VORs, okay? The VOR is basically the base type of navigational aid that planes use. There are other ones out there. There's other things called NDBs, and there's a few different ones we'll learn about, but the far majority are these VOR systems that are out there. And in this class, that's kind of your ground base. So that's basically the plane is picking up something on the ground to know where it's at. Modern day technology with airplanes, a lot of the new stuff nowadays uses just regular GPS technology, where it's actually not using any ground-based systems, no VORs, no frequencies, nothing that's based on the ground, but they're using like all satellite technology. So that's the way everything is shifting, okay? But we still have all this huge network of ground-based navigational aids, these VOR systems out there that make up all of these different airways all across the United States. So in this class, we're going to learn how to manually flight plan based on using ground-based navigational facilities only. Okay, we're not going to learn, for some reason the FAA likes us to learn ground-based navigation, and instead of the more modern and what's going to be the norm for navigation as it slowly gets better and more developed will be the GPS, RNAV type technology, which is way more accurate, by the way, way more accurate. Satellite GPS navigation is incredibly more accurate than using these ground-based VOR systems. So the big issue with ground-based navigation is that you have to, first of all, it costs a ton of money to keep all of these VORs and these different systems up and running. Those things take a power supply that's pretty immense just to keep it operational and sending out radio frequencies for planes to pick up. Obviously, satellite stuff that's already in place, and those things don't go out. They don't lose. A lot of these VORs, break down and have to be fixed. And then if you have a VOR that's not currently working, then FAA people and National Weather Service people have to go out and fix it, and they just cost a lot of money, lots of upkeep. Millions and millions of dollars every year is spent on the upkeep of this system that's slowly becoming more outdated. But in this class, we will learn ground-based navigation, okay? And that's how all of our flight planning is going to be. It's going to be you take off from an airport, you navigate to the nearest VOR, you get on these jet airways or Victor airways, and you design your flight path to go on these different airways along the route to where you want to go, and to a VOR that's near an airport, land at an airport. So that's how we're going to do everything in this class. So with that said, the first thing that we want to, there's a whole slew of information in navigation, because there's these airways, there's these different navigational aids, there's different classes of airspace, and airspace is just a kind of a whole thing by itself. Like when you get in and around like really big airports, you have different classes of airspace. See, I'm going to zoom in here like on Salt Lake City as an example. So this website that we're on is the thing that's really cool about it is that all of these charts are normally you can only get into them by basically purchasing, and I've got some in my bag there that I can show you a little bit, but most of these charts are all big paper charts that you have to pull out and spread out over your desk and figure out. And if you're going from this one to this one, sometimes you got to take 2 or 3 charts and connect them together. This SkyVector website program basically takes all of these charts and puts them into one graphical thing that we can drag around and for free. So SkyVector is literally going to become your best friend, and you'll see why as we move into flight planning later, especially. But anyway, so I can drag this thing around and I can zoom into anywhere I want. But when we're looking at this, these big areas like out here west of Salt Lake City, so there's the Great Salt Lake, and this stuff out here, these are all different classes of like different airspaces and restricted areas. So anybody that's familiar with like the Salt Lake area knows that like west of the Great Salt Lake is a huge like training and test facility that they go out there and they drop bombs, and it's used for Hill Air Force Base. And anyway, so that airspace out there is all restricted. You can't just go jump in your Cessna, take off, and go cruising around out there, through that airspace. It's restricted. They're not going to let you enter it. So these maps here that we're looking at are designed for somebody that's going to go out and fly, so that they know, hey, where can I actually go? I want to go from here to here. Am I going to be able to just fly a direct path? No, that path goes straight through the middle of Air Force restricted airspace where they're out doing combat maneuvers. So probably not a good idea, right? So that's what this is showing us. It also shows us different class, like when you get in close to like an airport, like Salt Lake City, which is obviously a large hub airport. It shows you there's different types of airspace that are around large airports they're not necessarily restricted, but it's going to be an environment that's completely controlled by air traffic control. So obviously you can't, same idea, right? You can't just take your little plane and go cruising around and just go flying over the top of a huge airport that has hundreds of planes taking off and landing, right? ATC is not going to let you do that because it's in a certain type of airspace, which is controlled, radar controlled by air traffic control. You can't just go, you have to have clearance to go through it. So you're gonna learn the different types of airspaces, which ones you can just freely go into whenever you want, and which ones you need clearance to actually go into. So the first airspace that they go in classes, and the first one that we'll talk about is Class A airspace. Okay, so if you want to write down Class A airspace, you're going to need to know all of these classes of airspace. And I have some PowerPoints and some videos, obviously, that you'll see and watch and you can refer to as well. But Class A airspace, okay, Class Alpha. The other thing that you're going to need to get to know in this class as well is the phonetic alphabet. Is everybody familiar with the phonetic alphabet? Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, all of that stuff. So learn your phonetic alphabet. We're not going to test on it, but just learn your phonetic alphabet. So Class Alpha airspace is what this is referred to as. But Class A, or Alpha, is anything from 18,000 feet up to 60,000 feet. So primarily, Class Alpha airspace is pretty much just for, so 18,000 to 60,000 feet. But Class Alpha airspace is it's really just for aircraft that are mostly commercial aircraft for the most part, okay? Obviously, it has to be an aircraft that's pressurized that can actually go that high. But you need clearance. So what I want you to do is write the airspace down, write like the classification, like what altitudes it represents, and then also we're going to talk about what you need in order to enter that airspace. Okay. So Class Alpha, you need an IFR clearance. It's completely controlled by air traffic control. The next one that we'll talk about, so that's all you kind of need to know for Alpha right now. It's basically your higher altitudes, okay? That's where most commercial planes fly once they get up to cruising altitude. They're in Class Alpha airspace. And it's all controlled by ATC, and you need clearance to get into it, okay? So if you're a VFR pilot, now it's possible to go out there, like, who has their private pilot's license in here? You do? Okay. So John here, if he wants to go out and just fly a plane, he doesn't need to like go out and file a flight plan with ATC. He can like go out to the airport, jump in his Cessna. Are you just private, or do you have multi-engine or anything like that? Instrument?
High power and instrument.
You have instrument? Okay. So he can go and actually file an IFR flight plan, but he also, like, people that are like just private pilots that just have that rating, they're basically VFR only. So that means visual flight rules. It means a certain weather criteria has to exist. The weather has to be good enough for them to just go out and fly, but they also don't have to talk to ATC. Depending on where they're taking off and landing from, they don't need to talk to ATC at all. They don't got to file a flight plan. They can just go jump in their plane, gas up, go take off, and as long as they stay within the certain proper types of airspaces where they don't need to talk to ATC, first of all, where they don't need to have clearance to get in and out of, then they can go and fly around, go up, go down, as long as they remain within the proper airspaces and don't cross into anything that they're not supposed to be into. So the next one, we're not going to actually go in order. I'm going to skip to Class G is the next one I want to talk about. Class G or Class Gulf. Class G airspace is called uncontrolled airspace. That means it's not radar controlled. You don't have to talk to air traffic control. You don't have to have a clearance to get into it. Most of the airspace around here, around St. George, is Class Gulf airspace. Okay, just as an example. Like St. George does not have an air traffic control tower. So it's, I believe St. George, I have to look again. See, a lot of these things we don't look at too much, but I think St. George is mostly a Class Gulf airport.
I think it's Class G out to 4 miles.
Out to 4 miles, and then it's Class
I think it's Class E out to 4
E,
miles.
yeah, and that's
then
probably more
G
right.
outside that.
Yeah, I'm going to zoom down here to St. George. That's Cedar City. Okay, so here's St. George. Okay, so here's the St. George Airport. So you can kind of see this outline around St. George, this circular outline. That basically is telling you that this airspace, so this signifies Class Echo airspace.
How often are these charts updated?
Every 56 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what happens if you have one of those paper ones?
You got to get new ones. So, yeah.
Legally operating.
So kind of a just little side tidbit on just charts. So pilots, like SkyWest pilots, until recently, had to always carry a full set of charts with them. Okay. Not only did they have to carry a full set of charts, like manual charts, so they have these books. Yeah, have you ever seen, like, they carry this big briefcase around? Andrea, I'm sure, knows exactly what I'm talking about. But they used to carry around these big briefcases, and they're big, huge, 35, 40 pounds, and they're full of charts. And they were basically all of the sectional charts, which is what we're looking at now, of the entire United States, anywhere SkyWest flies, essentially. All of these sectional charts, as well as all of the individual airports, all of the approach plates to all of the airports that we fly to, huge bag. And not only that, not to make it even worse, they had to haul this thing around with them all the time, but every 56 days, when revisions came out, they had to go in and take the ones that have expired out and put in the new ones every 56 days. And they also have to do this with their manuals. In fact, I don't know, Andrea, has the flight attendant switched over to the EFB yet?
No, we are electronic and still carrying our paper manual.
Wow. Okay.
And have to keep both updated. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the pilots were also having to do the same things, because so SkyWest also has all of their own manuals, the flight operations manual and different things like that. They they had to also keep those updated anytime SkyWest. So they would always have to do all these revisions. But anyway, we have now switched to, on the pilot side at least, have switched to these tablets that they use, which now take the place of all of these charts and all of their manuals that they used to have to haul around everywhere. And yeah, it saves quite a bit of extra work. So
Are they changing airspaces or radio frequencies or?
Yeah, anything. I mean, really anything can change. Like if they change an approach, or if they change just even like just little things like at an airport, like for instance, even like when you think like St. George, used to be up here on the hill, then they moved it out. I mean, there's always changes like that going on, really worldwide. So they have to keep those updated basically in order to be the proper charts. But now obviously with these, they use these tablets in the plane that have all the charts, and those things automatically update. So no more carrying around the huge bag. And the flight attendants are close, it sounds like, to switching over to that as well.
Does the pilot have their own tablet, or the tablet stays in the plane and it's just there when they?
Every pilot has their own issued tablet. So there's even some tablets that are issued like in dispatch. We don't individually get one, but I think there's like 15 or 20 of them just for the room. So if you can actually go and get one and use it at your desk if you want to look at charts. We also have a website that we can just get into and look at charts though as well. So we don't normally need them, but anyway, so a lot of different things they can do on them though. But kind of going back to what I was talking about though, a private pilot can just go out and fly around to a certain extent as long as he stays in the proper airspace. But class golf airspace, the altitudes on class golf airspace can vary depending on what kind of airspace is around it, okay, or above it. And in no condition does it go higher. I don't think it goes any higher than 14.5, right? I'll have to look at it. Class golf, yeah.
Yeah, about 14.5 is where you're starting to get
back into echo.
Yeah, you're starting to get back into echo.
We'll look at all of them. I've got a
there's some
thing here.
I've got books with you, but I haven't looked at them all.
Yeah, this isn't normally stuff that we remember too much. Airspace. It's actually, it's actually for tomorrow's stuff. Just realized. So, well, anyway, we'll look at that more later, just to kind of give you a brief idea of what we're looking at. But airspace will be covered a little bit more tomorrow. So, anyway, the big thing that we want to look at today, though, is just the different types of charts. So this is a VFR chart. It's showing us terrain. It's showing us basically from the surface up to about 15,000 feet. Okay, 15 up to 18,000 feet. So this is showing us basically everything in between that. And this is really just showing us the different airspaces. If you zoom in here, these little blue lines you can see here, these are airways. So these circular compass things right here, these represent an area where there's a VOR. So right here, I'm looking at Milford, okay? And Milford is just central, kind of western Utah, but central. Anybody know, let's see, what's Milford close to? Yeah, it's close to Beaver. Okay, it's just basically just northwest of Beaver. So there's a VOR out there, and it's called the Milford VOR. And that's what, see this little, I'm going to zoom in really close here, but you see this little design right there? It's like a little triangular thing with little dot in the middle there. That represents a VOR. And anytime you see one of these compass things that go around, that represents a different VOR. So there's one here, there's one over here. This is the Bryce Canyon VOR. This over here is the Cedar City VOR. As we go north, there's the Delta VOR up here. Anyway, all of these VORs connect different routes. So you can see these blue lines that they come down, it connects into this VOR, and then it comes off of the VOR and it goes to another VOR. And that's basically how these little airways are made up.
Cool. Did you tell us already what these like were in the outline section of?
Yeah, like those things there.
That's the east. That's fine.
That means, so usually you see those around airports, and that means that it's just Class E airspace around that airport. But you'll learn more specifically about what Class E is on, I guess it would be, I'll publish it so you can see it tomorrow, but it's Monday's stuff. So.
I actually worked on the air conditioner at the VOR on Bay Delta.
Oh, really?
I worked on the air conditioner once.
Well, we're gonna get eventually here in a few weeks. We're gonna go out and take a tour. We're gonna go out to the St. George Airport. So any of you guys that are out of towners want to come in town for that, then feel free. Not exactly sure, Andrea, but I'm gonna try and arrange it more to like when everybody is in town. So hopefully, but we actually will go out there and we'll tour the airport. We'll go driving up and down the runway. We'll go see the approach light system. We'll go to the airport rescue firefighting facility. You can jump up into the big fire truck and take pictures. Anyway, we try and time it. It'll be on a Tuesday night class. But we try and time it so that when the Denver St. George flight gets in for the RON flight, the overnight, that we watch it come in, and then once it gets in and they deplane it and everything, we'll actually go over and walk around the plane and look at some of the stuff. Go in the cockpit, take a look at some of the stuff that, this will be after we learn about systems and things like that. So things will make a little bit more sense when we look at it. But anyway, when we do that, we'll also go out into the VOR and we'll actually go inside of it. And yeah, it takes a lot of, I've got the big air conditioners inside there to keep that thing cool all day long. So, and there's computers in there. It's kind of cool looking. Anyway, we'll see one. We'll go inside of one. So, yeah. But yeah, so that is kind of what this page is for. On this particular map, you're not going to really use a lot. I'm going to switch now to what's called the World Low IFR chart. Looks a little bit different. Doesn't show any terrain.
That was the cool part.
Yeah. Well, this one's a little bit more visually easy to see the jet or the Victor Airways. Now remember, so the Victor Airways are the airways that are basically below 18,000 feet. They're for the lower flying stuff. They're the same ones as the blue ones we just looked at. Okay, on this map, they're black though. So, but you can see they're the same ones, and the same thing with the VORs. Now you can kind of see the outline of the VOR a little bit better, the little shape that they give it with the compass thing that goes around it. But now you can clearly see the airways that connect in and around it. You can also see, if I zoom out a little bit more, you can see like this area here that's all blue, that's an area of restricted airspace. So you can still see different airspaces that you're not supposed to fly in and around. So these airways are there to help us really stay in the proper airspaces. If you are actually flying on an airway, then it's guaranteed that it's not going to take you into airspace that you're not supposed to be into.
On our map, or at least on mine anyway, I have all these like green dot, little red spaces.
Oh, if you go to your layers,
It shows baseball games, football games,
yeah.
fires.
So if you click on layers right here, you can turn a lot of that stuff off.
Oh, cool.
if you go to the nav, so you can turn off a lot of those little things.
So how come you need to know, like if a football
Like that has those on there. So this, so see this thing that I'm toggling right here, those are temporary flight restrictions.
Oh, I see.
That means when you turn those on, that means that's an area that you can't fly over. So if I hover over this area, it'll tell you there's a TFR. It's a security TFR, but it's from 4,100 feet to 18,000 feet. So if you're above 18,000 feet, it's not going to matter. Now, a lot of these are mostly due to forest fires. Like if you look at these ones up here in Northern California and Oregon, most of these are fires. So they don't want you flying over areas where there's active fire, airborne firefighting stuff going on, where they're out there dropping, fire retardant, stuff like that. So you'll always see TFRs. You also see them over big sporting events. There was a big article about, the Super Bowl, how they filmed all those drones that were flying around and all that stuff. So they actually filmed that a couple of days before the Super Bowl because they, and then just played it during the Super Bowl. Because during the Super Bowl, you couldn't have done that because there's a TFR over, even for drones, there's TFR right over the stadium. You can't fly over the stadium. So,
What does TFR stand for?
Temporary flight restrictions. You also will see it a lot for for instance, there's a permanent TFR out over like the White House and a lot of those monument areas in Washington, D.C. Correct. PFR. But you'll see them, sporting events, anytime the president's out cruising around, if he's flying somewhere, like if he's flying into LA, you'll see a TFR over LA for like a 45-minute window, like around his arrival time, because they stop all traffic when he's flying in and out of anywhere. So
would that be VIP? I see one that says VIP.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, VIP. Which one says VIP?
It's over on the East Coast. Let's see, where is this at? Middletown. Oh yeah, Washington D.C.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
VIP valid for 27 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the Trumpinator?
Yeah. Then you can see just northeast of that one. There's aerial demonstrations. So they're having an air show. So surface to 10,000 feet, valid for 3 hours. That's for an air show. Anyway, yeah, you can. There's a lot of different little reasons. There's another air show there in the Midwest. Anyway, yeah, those are TFRs, but we'll look at those more later. Anyway, getting back into this. So when we zoom in here, this is Salt Lake City here, but you can see there's VOR, there's these different routes that come in and connect. But anyway, we're going to learn how to file routes, and we will stay on these types of little routes that take us around everywhere. So this is the low IFR chart. The one, however, that we are primarily dealing with for when you guys do your en-route planning is going to be the high IFR chart. So now this is everything from 18,000 feet and higher. And this is now where instead of calling a Victor route or the V routes, you'll see that they're all called J routes, standing for just jet routes. A lot of those same VORs also have both Victor routes and jet routes connected to them. But if you think about it, if you looked at it from a layered standpoint, like if you looked at a cross section of this, you would see the VOR, you would see like the signal that it sends out going kind of straight up in a radius around it. But you would also see, on the lower level, you would see the Victor airways that come through, and then higher up you see the jet airways that will come in and go through it. So if you can imagine it like that. So in this class, primarily you're going to be using the jet airway stuff. We can use Victor Airways, but we'll get more into that later as well when we do flight planning. But really kind of the idea is just to understand what these charts are. So we've looked at that very first one that had all of the terrain was a VFR chart. The second one was an IFR chart, but it was a low altitude IFR chart. And remember, VFR is visual flight rules. That means they don't need clearances or anything. IFR is instrument flight rules. That means you do need ATC clearance. Yeah, Scott?
You said Victor Airways earlier, and I thought that was 18,000 feet now.
No, yeah, Victor Airways is they're all below 18,000. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And then this is the high en route IFR chart, meaning 18,000 feet and higher, jet routes. It still shows you, big features, like it'll obviously show you that the Great Salt Lake is there, but you don't have terrain at 18,000 feet. I don't believe there's even a mountain in the continental United States that reaches 18,000 feet. So this clears all terrain. So it's not going to show us terrain. It knows that if you're at that level, that you're above any terrain in the continental United States. So it shows you the VORs. Anyway, but there's all these different airways that just crisscross, and you can see they just go everywhere. Like, just to kind of give you that example again, if you were down in LA, let's see here. There's Palmdale. Okay, so there's LA. So the Los Angeles airport is right over here. But if you were leaving LA, then you can kind of zoom out. Like if I type in this little, what I can kind of do here just to kind of show you is I can pretend that we're flying LAX to Salt Lake City. You can actually just type it in like this and hit enter. And what it does, is it actually, so it doesn't necessarily draw, it just draws a straight line from LA to Salt Lake. It tells you how far that is, just straight line wise. It's 512 nautical miles. But do you think that if we were flying LA to Salt Lake that we could just fly this straight line? Not a chance in hell. I mean, you can just zoom in and look at it. Like if you start knowing your airspaces, it flies right over Area 51. Anybody ever heard of Area 51? This is Area 51, right in here. Anyway, but all of this stuff out here that you see, this is all restricted airspace. It's all testing ranges. There's a reason that you see none of those jet routes go through this area. So clearly we can't just go flying through there. So you can kind of see now by looking at this, if you see an area that has no jet routes or any sort of airways going through it, it's probably, closed off, restricted, confidential area. Nobody flies through it though. There's some other areas like up in here where it's just really just because it's more uninhabited. But start looking at Salt Lake. So there's this restricted airspace here. So here's Salt Lake City. You have, the main freeway that goes east-west through Salt Lake is I-80. But I-80 goes along this corridor west of Salt Lake out this way, like out towards Nevada, towards Wendover. But you can kind of see there's also these airways that go through this same corridor. But you can see north of that corridor, restricted airspace. South of that corridor, restricted airspace. So there's literally just this little gap right here that planes can fly through. And so there's an airway that goes through it. It's kind of like the freeway. The freeway also goes right through that too. But you can see they always go around these different things. So now there's this jet route. So take a look at this one as an example. Jet route 56. Okay. See how it goes right through the middle, right through the heart of this restricted airspace in here? If you zoom in on the chart, you can see here it says J56 within R6405, which is this, it's basically referring to restricted airspace 6405, which is this one right here, through restricted airspace 6406 alpha, which is this one over here, and B, and this other one is unavailable when restricted areas are in use. So if the restricted areas are not being used, you can go through it. But basically, you can't just plan, to go through it. Like, you have to get clearance ahead of time, find out that, hey, I'm going to be flying through here at like 5 o'clock. You need to find out if it's going to be being used at that point. You got to talk to ATC, and ATC can clear you through that area because they'll be the ones that'll know if it's being used or not. But yeah, exactly.
They fly drones out there.
Yeah.
I did a few jobs out there. It's crazy watching those drones.
Yep. In fact, yeah, I've been up into the little base up in Ogden where they actually do a lot of the piloting of the drones.
That's cool. Yeah, those things are huge. You don't realize how big they are.
Yeah.
They're huge.
Anyway, going back to our straight line here from LA to Salt Lake. So that's, if we were flying this route, shortest possible route, that's what we would want to do. Obviously, we can't do that though. So you start seeing what we can find as far as an airway goes. Well, you can the reason I put the line on there is so that we can kind of follow to see what is the best one to use. So you can kind of see there's this one that's kind of going along this path. So we can actually take our little line here and come over here and just drop it. And then we can hit plan. That's the Daggett VOR. And we keep going a little bit further and take our line and put it here. That's the Vegas VOR. Anyway, it's keeping it on this jet route here though. Flying VOR to VOR. Let's see then. Take it and put it on this little intersection right there. What's that?
How are you dropping that route?
You left click, drag it over, let go, and then once you let it go, it'll give you that option of like what is right there that you want to plan. So this is what's called an intersection. Intersections are points along airways that we can navigate to, because you can see like this jet route right here takes a little bit of a left-hand jog instead of going straight. It'll normally do that at intersections, and so we can, as long as we know how far that intersection is away from that VOR. So if we're flying this flight along this jet route here, we pass over the Vegas VOR, and you have stuff inside your plane that tells you, picks up these VOR receivers. It tells you how far away you are from them when you're right over the top of them. So as you fly over it, then it starts to tell you, that you're now past it and you're flying away from it. Well, this little intersection here, and you'll get to know a lot of this stuff, but see this little 24 right here? That means that intersection is 24 miles from that Vegas VOR. So once your little instrument in your airplane reads 24 miles past the Vegas VOR, then you'll know that you're at that intersection. So now I planned this one up here, this Nora intersection, but anyway, just that's what those are, but we can use those along our routes. So just kind of coming up here again. So now our line is right here. I'm going to drag it over. So when I let go, it'll give me the option. I can plan the airport or I can plan the VOR. You just look for the little shape. So I'm planning the Milford VOR. You just click on plan. And then you can see how it's staying on the airway though now as I kind of go north. So now this one, even though it's already right over the top of it, you still kind of adjust it and then you plan the Delta VOR. Keep going north again, drag it over again, put it on the Fairfield VOR. And then you can kind of see, so there's Salt Lake City right there. And it's already kind of on that little airway. So now that we've put this all on Airways, you can kind of see that's more what the route ends up looking like. And that's kind of that main corridor that I was just talking about. So, you start looking up in the air. If you're ever out, looking at planes flying over, you normally see a lot of traffic along a certain corridor. Well, that's just because they're flying on this airway. This goes almost right over St. George. What's that?
I've been watching them, they've been going northwest.
Yeah.
Looks like.
Yeah, and there's a lot of obviously different areas. So when you zoom in to where St. George is here, okay, so that little VOR that's out there just past Mesquite, that's called the Mormon Mesa VOR. It's right here. Then that's the Mesquite Airport, and then up here is the St. George Airport. So we're right here, but you can kind of see there's this high traffic route right here, and then there's this other one just to the south. So it kind of just on both sides of the airport here, and then you have one that's kind of more out over the, once you get out more towards like Santa Clara, up in kind of that northwest area, that's kind of the jet route. If you see planes up there, they're kind of going more up to northern Utah. You see them down kind of where we are here, straight above us, they're really going more over towards like Colorado. They're on these lower ones that are going, just start to look at these are going out, more towards Denver and, places like that. So anyway, it kind of gives you just an idea of how that works a little bit. Let's take a break, and then we're going to watch a video.
Basically cities, easy to spot at night, they're typically all lit up. Easy to spot during the daytime too, because this is all smog plant.
Sorry, I forgot to put the link on this for these other guys to watch.
And in here, that's what all these tiny little sprout things are. That just is a symbol that means mini lakes. And then all in here is what.
This is the link if you guys are watching online, if you want to pull it up separately. So. Okay.
Going to be built up with lots of roads and houses. As we look over here, we see Magenta Airport, Venice Airport, and Magenta. And that means it's a non-towered airport. We can look over here and see Punta Gorda, it's blue. That means it is a towered airport. We notice the Class D ring, the blue dashed line here, Class Delta ring. And we notice this hazy magenta ring around here, hazy magenta ring denoting that the Class E airspace comes all the way down to 700 feet here, where everywhere else out here, Class E airspace is all at 1,200 feet, and it's Class G below that. So at Venice, it's Class G airspace from the surface on up to 700 feet, and then above that, Class E airspace. Out here, Class G from the ground, and up to 1,200, and then Class E airspace. We can see here, we've got, let's use Punta Gorda for an example. Their Class D airspace, this blue ring, goes up to 2,500 feet. So 2,500 feet MSL. And so if we're at, say, 3,000 feet MSL, then we're above their airspace. We're clear of the Class Delta. We can look here and we can read that this is for the Punta Gorda Airport, and the identifier for Punta Gorda is PGD. They have a control tower, CT, and that frequency is 121.0. It has a star there, meaning that that's a part-time control tower. At about 10 p.m., that control tower closes, and we can check that time in our AFD, or Airport Facility Directory, that little green booklet, or on your iPad. That'll tell you what time the tower hours of operations are. Then we have this little blue C here next to all this, and what that means is when the tower closes, the CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, is going to be 121.0. If we come back to Venice over here, we notice that the CTAF frequency is 122.725. There's no control tower in Venice, so it's just 122.725 all day long and all night long. Over here we have an ASOS, an Automated Surface Observation Station at Punta Gorda to get weather information from. That frequency is 135.675, so we would dial that frequency into our comm radio, the left side of the panel typically, to either talk to the tower or listen to the ASOS. The field elevation is 26 feet above sea level. We have lights at the airport, so if we're coming in there at night, it's lighted, but it's got a little star next to that L, and what that means is it's lit part-time, or lighting limitations exist is the technical term. Lighting limitations exist. What those lighting limitations typically are is, well, the lights turn off, and to turn back on, you'll have to click your mic 3 times, 5 times, or 7 times within 5 seconds. And by clicking the microphone, making that pop, pop, pop sound frequency, it'll turn the lights back on. 3 times low, 5 times medium, 7 clicks for high. The longest runway we have available at Punta Gorda is 7,200 feet. We could look over here at Venice and notice the longest runway we have is 5,000 feet. The 122.975 frequency down here, there's not a C next to it, it's not an ASOS frequency. What that is the Unicom frequency. So that frequency is what we could use to contact the FBO when we're 20 miles out and ask them to have a rental car ready for us, or ask them, what the price of fuel is, or any sort of services you need from the FBO. You would contact them on that frequency. And same thing in Venice, the FBO. You can see that the FBO also uses this as the Unicom frequency as well as the CTAF. Typically, towered airports don't want you calling over tower frequency for things like rental cars and stuff like that, so they have a separate frequency there for that. We can notice here that we have these little dashed lines coming from our circle. We have them in Venice as well. And then we notice that this is just perfectly round here at Coral Creek. What those little squares are, little lines coming off there, it denotes that there's services available at the airport. Typically that the airport has fuel or maintenance services available. So if you're looking for a place to land, you wouldn't want to go here. That's private anyways. We can see PBT, it's private. But we could go to La Belle, we could go to Punta Gorda, we could go to Venice, so we could expect to find some fuel there. Not to say that it's open 24/7, but during the day, you could expect to find a fuel pump somewhere there. We also see at Punta Gorda, we have this little star here. We've got another star over at Venice. Those stars mean that there is a rotating beacon in service from sunset to sunrise all night long. So we'll see a white and a green flash as we're flying towards the airport. It's like a lighthouse, but for airplanes. And so that's a lighted rotating beacon on the airport. They also typically turn that beacon on during the daytime when the weather's below VFR. So if you see it going at noon or 1 o'clock and it's bright daylight outside, probably means the ceiling's awful low or visibility is very low. How we're going to use this sectional chart to navigate is we're going to identify landmarks. This whole idea of a VFR sectional chart is that it's visual in nature. So VFR sectional, all visual. Well, we got some great visual identifiers. We have a highway running into another big highway, interstates here. We can see Interstate 75 there, so that's very easy to see that intersection there. We've got towers that show up to let us know there's towers in the area, and these are the heights of the towers. 330 feet MSL, 601 feet MSL, 586 above ground level, 601 feet above sea level. So it looks to me like the ground, if we did some simple math there, the ground is 15 feet above sea level. Here we've got another tower, 269 feet MSL. We've got a big tower up here, and they changed the symbol for the big tower. They make it 1749. If it's over 1,000 feet tall, it's this taller tower. All these little teepees are just 1,000 feet or less. So when we see this big tall symbol here, 1,750 foot, that's a tall tower. You're going to want to be probably 1,000 feet above that thing to clear it. You're going to be nearly 3,000 feet just to clear a tower. But we can see here that the ground elevation in that area is still less than 100 feet. So it's pretty close to sea level still there. We also see some rivers here we could use to identify, and some bridges. Bridges are great identifiers, as well as some passes. We can see where we'd have a big pass there. We have Stump Pass here. We don't see those names on the chart. We just know that from living in the local area. But it even denotes all these little islands for us, another little bridge here. So very easily identifiable things. Another pass up here. So when you're along the coastline, or you're really when you're flying anywhere, you can always find a river and a road that intersect. Intersections are great to identify yourself. Intersecting roads here. We have railroads, these little things with the hash marks across there. I guess that's supposed to be their version of railroad ties. So railroad passing through the town of Arcadia. So we can probably find a railroad, follow that into the town. We'll see all the buildings around with the swampland all around. Look just to the southeast of there and we'll find the airport. So very easily identifiable things is what you're looking for in the sectional chart. We even see some different airspace over here. some MOAs, which we'll get into later in another video, some military operations areas and restricted airspace. And also, we'll take a look here at Class Charlie airspace. That's the solid magenta ring, so Class Charlie airspace around Sarasota Airport here. It's got a little bit of echo airspace that comes out to the surface right there. And we have Bravo airspace all around the Tampa area. And this is the Tampa Class Bravo. Several rings, kind of like an upside-down wedding cake shape that we talked about in our airspace videos, which I'll put some links in down in the description so you can learn all about Class A, B, C, D, and E airspace, as well as G airspace. There's no F airspace. Other little things to note on this sectional chart. Lakes are great things to reference, but they're not going to put every little lake on there. So smaller lakes probably won't be on there. If it's a half mile or a mile across, you can expect to see it on the chart probably. We'll also take a little quick look back here to our airport symbology. We notice here we have RP13. What does RP13 mean? It means right pattern for runway 13. And we have this little depiction here of the runways of Venice. And now this isn't totally current. We don't actually have runway 927 anymore. It's been closed for many years. They still kind of have it depicted on the chart there. But we would check the AFD, and a current AFD would let us know what runways we do in fact have. This is just a rough depiction. And we would know runway 13 heading this way is right traffic, where all the other runways like 31 are left traffic. We can also look over here, and the last thing we'll talk about on the sectional chart is our VOR. So we see this compass rose ring around this Class D airspace. Let's look at some other Class D airspace so we see what one looks like without a VOR. So we find a nice little Class D airport over here on the other coast. We can see they don't have that compass rose. They don't have a VOR on the airport, even though it is a Class D airport with a ceiling of 2,500 feet MSL, control tower 120.4. So let's go ahead and look here at Punta Gorda Airport. And we'll see we have this little dot. That's the location of the VOR on the field. And then this compass rose letting us know that we have a VOR there. In here, VOR, frequency, Punta Gorda VOR, the identifier for it, the Morse code identifier for it, which we'll talk about later, and the frequency you would dial into your nav radio. Typically the nav radio is on the right side of the instrument panel. And you'll dial in 110.2. And that would give you the Punta Gorda VOR. You could turn up your nav radio volume and listen to the Morse code identifier if you want. You could contact St. Petersburg Radio, St. Petersburg Flight Station on 122.025. We'll talk about flight service later on in our course. But that's the basics of our VFR sectional. VFR sectional, visual reference. We have some railroad tracks. We have roads. We have rivers. And we have big interstates we can use all to identify where we're at, along with the towns and cities. Other airports make great checkpoints. And of course, our barrier islands are very helpful as well. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. And thank you so much for sharing us on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social media sites. If you have any questions about the video.
So not a ton of stuff that you guys need to know, but just gives you the basics of what you're looking at is all, kind of what is going on with those charts. Like I said, we don't use those ones too much. This next one is the low IFR chart.
It definitely makes them look less scary when you know what all of the little things are for.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey guys!
Whoa! He sounds better than Barb as well, by the way. So this is the link for the next one.
This is John from FlyMikeAlpha.com, and today we're going to be going over low and route charts and some of the basic symbology on these charts that's a little bit different than your regular VFR sectional charts. So as we come down here to the Sarasota, Venice area, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our basic airport markings. And we don't see the blue or magenta markings like we're used to.
I was going to say to notice as well, he's using Sky Vector. So anyway.
And then we now see green, brown, or possibly blue airport markings like we have up here in Jacksonville, where Jacksonville is a blue airport. So if it's green or blue, realize that there are instrument approach procedures going into that airport. If it's brown, then there simply is not approach procedures or radar minima published for that airport. As we come back down towards our local area here, we're going to see some more common things that we recognize, like Compass Roses for VORs, Victor Airways that are often also published on VFR sectional charts. The differences we notice here are it's a little bit more obvious when these Victor Airways intersect with each other and create intersections. And of course, all these intersections have names. And these intersections are often found in a GPS database and can be navigated to. And you'll use those intersections when you're building IFR flight plans. So when you're building an IFR flight plan, you may name these different intersections on your route of flight, along with something like from the LaBelle VOR via Victor 157 to Rince intersection. We can see where our Victor Airways are named, Victor 521, Victor 157, and we see some numbers below them, and those numbers are distance markers. And what's the difference between this number that's all by itself, 11, versus this one, 77, that's in a box? Well, if it's in a box, it's a total distance marker, so it's measuring from the LaBelle VOR all the way up to the Lakeland VOR, compared to this 11 is just measuring the distance between Quincy and Rince intersection. We can see here we have some notes even on Victor 157 that is 77 miles from Lakeland VOR to the LaBelle VOR, or 94 miles from the Lakeland VOR all the way down to the RSW VOR. Now we're used to those minimum elevation figures, those big numbers with the big first number and the little second number that denotes the highest obstacle in the area on a VFR sectional chart. And around Sarasota, that number is 1,900, a big 1 and then a 9. And that talks to us about that little tower that's out to the east of Sarasota that's up pretty high there in a hazard forest. So now we notice we have the same big number, big first number, little second number, and that is going to be our AROCA, off-route obstacle clearance altitude. So the off-route obstacle clearance altitude, AROCA, 2,900, is 1,000 feet higher than the 1,900 we normally have in this quadrant, because this number here doesn't tell you the height of the highest obstacle. It gives you the altitude you should fly at, or the minimum altitude you could fly at if you're off route in that area and still have your minimum 1,000-foot clearance between you and terrain. So when you're flying IFR in non-mountainous areas, you should always have 1,000 feet between you and terrain. And then in mountainous areas, like North Carolina maybe, you need 2,000 feet between you and the highest obstacle. So for us here, the off-route obstacle clearance altitude, 2,900. We can see if we stick to a published route, like Victor 35 here, then we could go down to 2,000 feet if we're along that published route, because that route keeps us clear of that obstacle, that tower. We can even see here on Victor 579, we could fly at 3,000 feet, and that is our MEA, minimum in-route altitude, or we have an asterisk next to 1,600. We could fly at 1,600 feet along Victor 579 and still have 1,000 feet obstacle clearance, but that is a MOCA, a minimum obstacle clearance altitude, and all it guarantees you is that you're not going to hit anything. It does not necessarily guarantee you that you're going to be able to receive the Viola intersection or identify it, because you may be too low and too far from the VOR to receive a good signal. So this MOCA is an altitude that will guarantee you obstacle clearance and signal reception if you're within 22 miles of the VOR. So if you're within 22 nautical miles from the VOR, you will get the signal reception guaranteed and obstacle clearance. But once you're more than 22 miles, you may not be able to pick up the signal, and you would have to go up to 3,000 feet. The 3,000 feet not only guarantees you obstacle clearance, it also guarantees you signal reception along the entire route, along this entire Victor Airway. Now, when would we change over from, say, the Sarasota VOR to another VOR we're flying to? Well, normally we would change over when we're halfway to our destination. That makes sense, so the signal's half as strong coming from one place, so we switch over to pick up the stronger signal as we get closer to the next VOR, unless it's designated otherwise. And what that looks like when it's designated otherwise is there'll be a changeover point. And that changeover point is actually where you want to switch the VOR signal, and I don't see any here in Florida. We may have to look at another map here, and we can see this little L-shaped or zigzag symbol is actually our changeover point. The changeover point will tell you not only where along the route pictorially, but it also gives you the distances from each VOR of where you should be switching your VOR receiver to for the best signal reception. The next things we notice here along these Victor Airways are these thick black lines and then an intersection, then another thick black line. But every so often we notice here that thick black line terminates with a little stop symbol there. So what is that little stop symbol about compared to Sabi versus Viola? Well, that stop symbol simply means that you need to look at your MEAs and realize that there's a different MEA along that route. Coming up here on the 312 radial from Lee County Vortac, RSW, we would be at 2,000 feet along the route, crossing pins at about 2,000 minimum. And then once we hit Viola, we need to immediately start climbing to 3,000 feet, so we have a higher MEA. The MEA here, 2,000 feet, along Victor 35, is the same when we cross, say, the intersection all the way down, so there's no markers here that denote a change in the MEA. These funny little boxes here, that with the arrow, is a total mileage box depicting total mileage to this point from the VOR, and total mileage from the St. Pete Clearwater VOR, St. Petersburg VOR, PIE, down to here is 56. From RSW to Sabi, it is 40. Here we can see when we go 9 miles back to Charo, it's 31. And of course, when we come just 2 miles back to Sexton, or however you like to say that, then it's 29. It's important to note that if you can't pronounce these intersections, don't feel bad. There's a lot of 30-year captains at Delta and American Airlines that can't pronounce them either. They're very difficult. Now, next thing we want to talk about is the difference between this little triangle here, this little intersection, and one that's an intersection, 5 letters, but not the little triangle, and it's not along a Victor Airway. Well, that's a GPS waypoint. The only way you're going to find it is not with your VOR, but with an RNAV or GPS system in the aircraft. Remember, those GPS systems can't be an iPad. It needs to be panel mounted and an approved TSO GPS for the airplane. It does so happen that oftentimes we have GPS waypoints along Victor Airways, but sometimes they can be all by themselves, and the reason for that is they probably are aligned somewhere along an approach to get you lined up with an approach into maybe Lewiston, since we do have approach procedures going into Lewiston. Now, these brown lines here are not anything we're going to follow. Those IR routes, if you remember from the sectional charts, IR were military routes. Now, when they're skinny military routes, like this one right here, IR20, that's a military route with a 5 nautical mile or less radius, or width rather, so 5 nautical miles either side of the center line, so really a 10-mile wide route along here, along IR20. And then these down here are more than 5 miles wide. It doesn't really tell us how much, but just more than 5 miles wide on either side of the center line, so more than 10 miles total diameter across the airway for IR34. Now, sometimes you'll notice that there are these VOR Compass Roses, and then sometimes they're bigger, and then sometimes they're not there at all, like for the Homestead VOR. It simply is missing. Well, if it doesn't have a Compass Rose, but it's depicted as a VOR with that little droid-type symbol, that is a terminal VOR, so something you're only going to be able to receive 25 miles out. It's for a very local area, probably just to help with approach procedures. Then when you see a Compass Rose, the size of it actually doesn't matter. The size is just there to accommodate the congestion of the airspace. So since there's 2 VORs next to each other here, they made them smaller so they fit nicely. No rhyme or reason to the size or width of the Compass Rose. People often mistake it for being a high or low VOR based on the size, and that's not the case. So what we have here is just either a high or low VOR for the Dolphin VOR and a high or low VOR for the Virginia Key VOR. We don't know if it is high or low. How we're going to tell that is to look in the chart supplement, and it will have an H or an L next to that VOR for an airport that it services. And also notice the difference between Vortac, VOR. When you see these little green dashed lines, that simply just means the same as like a terminal area chart in our sectional world or in our VFR world. They have a more detailed IFR chart for this particular area. We see this green along the coastline, that's denoting water. So when you have lakes, They're going to have green around them to denote water. We can see here we have this funny little symbol coming off of West Palm Beach, the 089, and what that is that's actually the localizer, and there's the localizer frequency, the identifier and the Morse code for it, that you could tune to and use that localizer to help you identify Wigbo intersection, or however you'd like to say that one. So you could identify Wigbo intersection off of the Vero Beach VOR, which is Treasure VOR, TRV there, down Victor 159, and then when you are on Victor 159 and you intercept in our center on the localizer for West Palm Beach, then you must be at Wigbo intersection. You could also identify Wigbo off of the Pahokee VOR. So either way would work, it just depends how you want to do it. Maybe the Pahokee VOR is out of service, so you have to use the localizer, or vice versa. Now we're familiar with MOAs and restricted areas from flying VFR. The restricted areas are still denoted in blue. MOAs are denoted in this brownish color here. And they simply will just try to vector you around those MOAs if they're hot. It's really up to air traffic control to keep you where you need to be when you're IFR. You really don't have to worry about airspace, and that's why the only airspace we really see depicted on here is Class Charlie and Class Bravo airspace. It doesn't really affect us when we're flying IFR. They're going to take care of sending us where we need to go, but it's just helpful for situational awareness. Another Class Charlie there at Daytona, and of course Jacksonville is also a Class Charlie. Now as we come down our map here, we can find the ADAs that we know as that magenta dotted lines here, and it's depicted with blue dotted lines, that same solid line. And so we still see where the ADAs is on our low en route charts, and of course if you're crossing it and you're on an IFR flight plan, you really don't have anything to worry about, but it's still good to reference if maybe you're on a composite flight plan and you want to know where that ADAs actually lies so you can activate your IFR flight plan before crossing it. The other thing to notice here is we have a lot of intersections, these little empty triangle boxes that are in fact empty. They're just little blank spaces there. And our VORs are the same way. They're empty as well. Well, what happens when it's colored in? Well, the difference is just that it's a compulsory reporting point. We'll talk a lot more about reporting points in another video, but it's a compulsory reporting point. So it doesn't affect anything other than that's a point that if you're not in radar contact, you need to report crossing it to ATC. You can see that the vast majority of our intersections are not compulsory reporting points simply because you're always in radar contact when you're in this area. The last thing we'll talk about is a little bit outdated. We don't really have it anymore, but we have NDVs depicted here as all these little dotted brown lines, and we can see another NDV here. They were used for many years for IFR and VFR navigation, and now we no longer test them, we no longer talk about them really with students, and most aircraft either don't have the receivers or the receiver's broken. So just simply know that that symbology there, if you're wondering what it is that 3-digit, 3-number AM frequency for a NDV. That's all we've got for basic IFR low en route charts. These charts cover from the ground on up to 18,000 feet MSL, flight level 180. Stay tuned for our next videos on the advanced IFR low en route charts and high charts. We'll get in a lot more in detail, but all the other symbology that's on here and all the other great information that's buried in these charts is very similar to all the great information buried in those sectional charts. Hey.
So, yeah, most of that stuff is not going to be stuff that's pertinent to us. I know he just covers a little bit of the stuff. This next one is going to be the one that's the most useful one, probably. Even though they still talk about things that we don't necessarily need to know.
Hey, guys.
You know, a lot of this is obviously these videos are more directly for pilots, you know. But if you're planning routes and stuff, which you know we do a lot of, it helps to know what you're actually looking at. So this is for the high altitude IFR, the jet route charts.
John from flyatmikealpha.com, and today I'm back with you to go a little bit more in depth over low en route charts, those IFR charts that cover from the surface on up to 18,000.
Fast forward.
So, First thing is, we'll quick cover airspace. Obviously, we have those restricted areas and MOAs on these IFR charts, just the same as we do on our sectionals. We have Bravo airspace, we have Charlie airspace, but we also have Gulf airspace denoted on here. So we can see these brown lines here denote different heights of Gulf airspace, and we're not going to be able to find out.
I just realized I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. That one had a part 2 for the low chart, but you saw everything you needed to see on the part 1. We're not going to
Good afternoon, everyone.
watch all of this.
Live Boy here, and today, the third video in the reading chart tutorial series. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about en route charts, IFR en route charts, the low and high en routes. We'll cover VFR charts on another video. Today we're just going to talk about low en route charts. Now, I don't know how many people in Flight Sim actually make use of the low en route charts. If you don't, you really should, because there's a lot of information.
Right, I gotta find the spot in this one that actually switches. Maybe I have the wrong link. Huh. Well, we're not going to watch that video. Guess I have the wrong link in there. Anyway, so we'll just go back in here and take a look at back what we were looking at. So the thing about the low and the high IFR charts is that both of them actually, I mean, they're both pretty similar. The only difference that is major between the two is that on the high you have the jet routes and on the low you have the Victor routes. So this is really for the higher altitude stuff, 18,000 feet and higher. And you still have a lot of the same airspace stuff that it's showing you. Overall, this chart has less, as far as like the features, like, like terrain, like just visible features, I guess, lakes and rivers and highways and things like that. So unless it's massive, like the Great Salt Lake.
What are the big planes on the shoulder?
So what those are, let's see here. Let me find one. Right there. Okay. So because these charts, so these are really a whole bunch of charts that are just taken and just put together. And so if you were looking at these like these are
like a line them up position.
Exactly. So it's like if I have, and I'll show you here. So I can switch this to the chart format here to where you're actually looking at charts instead. Yeah, so you see that half of the plane there? Yeah, it just lines it up with the one that goes next to it so that you know that you're lined up. But when you zoom out, when SkyVector first came out, it was just, actually all of them were just this. They were just pictures of these charts, and that you had to zoom in, you had to go chart to chart to chart to find stuff, but then they finally made it to where they just took them all and combined them. So obviously this is way better now, but that's all that is though. So that's does everyone have any questions on these charts? Like anything that you've seen on here that hasn't been explained? I know there's probably still a lot of confusing stuff on it, but really there's a lot of stuff you don't need to know. The basic idea though is you just want to be able to know, like the biggest thing is knowing like those distance marker things and being able to see those, being able to identify like intersections that are on the jet routes that you're going to use. And then obviously the VORs. So with VORs, this is something you're going to want to know as well. So write this down. There's 3 different types of VORs. You have low VORs, which basically mean a reception area of 40 miles. So, just if you're within 40 miles, you should be able to pick it up, unless there's a mountain or something blocking it. But if you're in the plane within 40 miles, you should be able to receive that. Then you have high VORs, and those have a 130-mile radius. And then you have terminal VORs. Those are the ones that are on the airports. And those have a 25 nautical mile radius on them. So, not to say that you couldn't have a high VOR at an airport, but generally speaking, terminal VORs are the ones that are at the airports, and they're really not used. They're used more for the instrument approaches that are connected to the airports. You'll learn a lot more about instrument approaches a little bit later, but those are the three different classifications of VORs. When we look at the high chart that we're on right now, on the high chart, it is only going to be high VORs. But like frequencies, a lot of this information, like I said, you don't necessarily really need to know a lot of the stuff that's kind of dotted around here.
So my chart doesn't have terminal VORs?
No, not on it. So because this is thinking like, so the high VORs are the ones that are connected to the jet routes. As far as this chart that you're looking at goes, generally speaking, jet routes are connected to high VORs. So not to say that it couldn't go through a low VOR, but if you're looking at the high chart, it's not going to show that low VOR. You'd actually have to switch to the low chart in order to actually see it. But then you would see more of the Victor Airways. You wouldn't see the Jet Airways. So anyway, but yeah, the high chart is generally the one you're going to be dealing with because most of our flights are going to be over 18,000 feet that we file them. We're going to be up in the 30s. So jet routes is mostly what we'll deal with. Now, the thing is that you'll see as we do flight planning, sometimes it's not necessarily convenient to use a jet route. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Like, let's see here. Where's a good one? Okay. Let's just say that we were doing a flight. So this is Boise over here. It's the Boise VOR. Let's say we were flying from Boise to Eugene, Oregon, which is right here. Do you see any jet route that really does us much good as far as there's not really much, right? So it's not going to be an easy route exactly. Like if you were to try to follow a jet route, you'd actually have to go like up on this one, J15, up all the way up into here, because these two, even though they cross over here, they actually don't connect. So the thing about jet routes is that the only place you can get onto a jet route is either at a VOR or at an intersection. The only place you can get off of a jet route is the same idea. So think of it like a freeway, okay? Freeways, you can only get on the freeway, the off-ramp, on-ramp, on or off, otherwise, you got to stay on until the next exit, right? So think of the intersections in the VORs as like your entrances and exits to jet routes. You can't just jump on a jet route in the middle of a jet route unless there's an intersection or a VOR that you're getting on at. That's the only places you can get on and off. So with that said, if you start looking at this, if you start in Boise, you're in Boise, so you're at that Boise VOR there, so you can get on this Jet 15 route here, and you can follow it up, and just kind of looking around here. So Eugene's over here, so now you can take it up to this Kimberly VOR, but then from here, well, there's not really, this little line here is not a jet route, obviously. This is just a little thing just telling us how to identify this intersection. But you could come over. It looks like you'd almost have to come. You can maybe go on this Jet 523 up to Klickitat, and then you could come down on this J143 down into the Eugene VOR there. But you can see that that's clearly out of the way, you know what I'm saying? So that's not ideally how we would want to fly this. So if you get into a situation where you don't have a jet route that really goes where you want it to go, and now this is an example of obviously the entire route wouldn't have a jet route, but a lot of times you'll be on a jet route and then you'll notice that it stops or it goes a different direction, but you need to go this totally different direction, and there's no other connecting jet route that really conveniently goes that direction. Well, then we can technically jump down to Victor routes and use those. We don't like take the plane down in altitude. We still stay up at 35,000 feet or whatever we're at, but we fly as if we're directionally speaking on the Victor route. So we can still use Victor routes even though we're flying way above their altitude, and use them as part of our plan. So like for instance, if we switch to the low, and now we look going from Boise to let's see, where did Boise go?
Then you would file that with like ATC or something so you know where they're going.
Yeah, you would do it all with ATC. So there's Boise. So now looking at this, there's this Victor route that goes straight west, V330, goes over to Wild Horse VOR. Then let's see where, so Eugene is right here. So then you can go up on this V269 to this VOR, which is the Deschutes VOR, and then over on Victor 121 into the Eugene VOR.
So if you're still at the higher altitude, how does that not affect the other routes? The higher route, the jet route? Because aren't you flying like right through them?
Well, no, see, I mean, because we didn't have any jet routes that like went through that. So jet routes can still cross each other, you know, but you might fly through one, but you're not on it though. So the other thing is too, is like when you fly west, you fly at odd altitudes. If you fly east, west is even, east is odd.
Interesting.
So, but that's also to separate. So you got one guy going this way, one guy going this way. You know that they're not going to be at the same altitude. You know that they're not going to smack into each other because this guy should be at an odd, this guy should be at an even, below or above. So, you know, if you're going the same direction, obviously you should be, you know, in ATC, if you're on an IFR flight plan, ATC is going to take care of your actual spacing and stuff. But that's another reason why it's not really a big deal, because you're just going to go. So those other guys going this way should be, you know, you're usually going to be at different altitudes anyway. So, but yeah, you could use that Victor Airway course there and just file that, still fly higher than 18,000 feet. So just know that when we go in to do flight planning, we'll sometimes use Victor Airways. Let's see.
Are there any canned routes that do that? You don't have any canned routes that use Victor Airways?
Yeah, some do. Yeah. Some of them do. The other thing is too is a lot of times for like major airway routes, like major cities, a lot of times ATC has preferred routes that they want you to file. You can actually, when you jump into all of this stuff, like if I filed, like, not sure, let's see which one would have one.
The SkyWest, would they have more of those? Well, of course it would, because you're doing a hub and spoke thing, right? So we're doing more outlying type of air terminals, I guess.
Yeah. So there's a route. So sometimes, like even in here, it'll show you if ATC has any preferred routes. That would be for a plane going slower. But anyway, but you can get in here and actually see, switch them around. Like if you go more to a major airport, LA to San Fran. Sometimes they'll have routes in there already that you can use. Not that we'll use in this class, but anyway. Let's see here. So yeah, we've looked at a bunch of those charts. A routes, J routes. The Q routes are these ones you can see on here that are blue. See how it says Q160, Q166, and then they have those things, those blue waypoints. Those are, once again, those are just for GPS. So in this class, we will not use Q routes. So you'll learn about them, and you'll learn about GPS and things like that, but we won't use those for any of our navigation in here. But they're all over the place, you can see. And a lot of them mirror the jet routes. A lot of times you'll get into them and they'll just suddenly stop, like right here. Kind of interesting. Nav Aids, we talked about the Nav Aids, airports, communication boxes, air traffic services, airspace information. So, let's see. I don't know why I didn't have the right link on that one. Just see what this one has real quick. This will show us how to use some of the other stuff on SkyVector.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Flight Sim Deck. My name is Patrick, and this is SkyVector.com. I get asked a lot what I use for flight planning, and this is what I use. I head over here, and they took all the aeronautical charts of the world, and they built this full real-life scale map of all the charts. In hindsight, it looks like Google Maps, but once you start to zoom in, you will see that they mapped out everything and a lot more. And I'm going to get into all that stuff. This is real world stuff here. This is why I like to use it. And, if you want the real flight sim experience, this is the way to go. So let's start with layers. Now, by default, a few of these are already on. I think this one, the flight restrictions, and the segments are already on. Now, this one, the text weather, these are all the main weather stations and airports that are going to be giving off weather. You can click on any of them, and you can either add it to the plan, or you can click on the airport here. It'll take you to a page that will tell you all about the airport. It'll have all the charts and everything. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything you need for your flight. Also, they have different flight restriction areas. I know, for instance, in San Francisco, there's an air show going on this weekend, and they are restricting that area. If you hover over, it says aerial demonstrations. up to 15,000 feet. It'll be live in 52 minutes. It also tells you when there's a fire going on. There's a fire here, another fire over there, and some other security warnings of restricted airspace. These normally have to do with weather. Like this one is referring to the hurricane going on in Florida right now. Click a couple of these off. Icing. This tells you where it's icing up, where you need to be turning on that anti-ice. You can click on it and get even more information. This one is the turbulence going on, so you can plan for that. Again, you can click and read. Pilot records, skip that one. This is pretty cool. This is reports from pilots, and they go all over the place. I guess there's more in the U.S. Than over in that area. They're kind of sprinkled through. But again, you hover over those. This one's saying there's light chop at 380. It was reported 38 minutes ago. This one is light chop at 360. Somebody was probably descending through this way and reported those. And also, they're reporting broken layers, overcast, light moderate chop at 210. So that's very cool that they have that.
Or how do they turn them on?
Yeah, pilots
just
expire usually. You can filter how long you want them on, but usually after an hour they'll just disappear.
Let's get in the weather radar, which is pretty cool. I'm going to turn the satellite on too. Actually, I'll leave the satellite off. Let's do the normal weather radar. This is the hurricane right now. It's hitting Florida, Hurricane Matthew. It's going to be going up through North Carolina too. So that's even more awesome about this is that you have weather radar. You can also turn on the satellite radar, and you get a much different image here. Even shows the clouds moving in.
What is this video?
Which is very cool. Very good for planning.
Yeah, so like whenever that was.
And that's just really nice. It's not very important. You can turn on the different North Atlantic tracks. FBOs, this is about fuel prices. And how much it's going to cost, where you're going, and all that stuff. Let's turn off the layers. Let's come over here to flight plan. You can close it like that. You can click this, brings it back up. And I'm going to show you how to do a flight plan. So let's go from Charlotte to Memphis. And when you do that, it'll draw a straight line from airport to airport without the waypoints. Now, they also have routes saved. You can click here, and here are some routes that they've already created, and you can add those in. But we're going to create our own route. So we're going to go, we're going to depart on the Bob 7. Then we're going to go here. Just bear with me while I type this all in.
Normally our flight plans aren't that long.
Once you type it in like this, it'll be all lowercase, and it won't show you until you click in one of these other boxes, and then it creates the plan, as you see here. Now, if you need anything, like I kind of showed you earlier, you can click Charlotte, and right here it has all the different departures and arrivals. You can click the airport, and you get everything you need about it. I mean, here's the main airport chart, all the frequencies, all the different runway information you would need, and then down here they have every single chart. So this is a great place to start for flight planning. Same thing with Memphis if you click that. Now, also, let's add in our speed. We'll be going, let's say, 300 knots. We'll go up to 360. And the fuel, let's put like 9 on that. And now it's updated with all that information. Now also, if you want to add waypoints, there's another way to do that. You can kind of click this and drag it anywhere, and wherever you let go, it'll show you the nearest VOR, the nearest intersection, the airport, and you can click one of those, and it draws a plan for you over there. So we'll do that again. We'll put one up here, hit that intersection, and it'll build a point there for that. Now this is just for demonstration that I created that. I'm going to leave it anyway. And now, after doing that, you can save these if you have an account, which is free to make. You just make one with your email and everything. And then you can save plans, load plans, then you can come back to them. So you can build them, and then later on come back and load the plan. Now if you click here, Nav Log, this is very cool. You can either print this out, put this up on an iPad, and this shows you everything from that plan. It shows you, the wind direction, the wind speed, temperature, your ETA, where your top of climb is, your top of descent. Although I don't think that top of descent there is, well, no, that's probably right, actually. No, that's right. Never mind. My bad.
This is what he just made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all this information. You can add in your fuel and write on it. Also includes the 2 main airport charts, the diagrams. So let's get out of there and get back to SkyVector. Okay, so now that I've talked about that, and you've seen that, you can also add the times in here. Your tail number, we need to be logged in to do that. And yeah, guys, now you have a plan. And we could go going this way from Charlotte all the way over to Memphis. Now, unfortunately, this does not connect up with Prepare 3D or Active Sky. You can save these out to, let's see, send plan to. You can send these to different apps you may have on an iPad or something, which is what I do is I have a laptop open when I fly, and I have this loaded up, and I've kind of followed along on the laptop. A lot of pilots in real life use iPads, and they would send it out to, this is the Garmin file, and they'll send it out to that and use it on the iPad. But if you have a laptop or a second monitor, you can just use that and follow the flight plan. But okay, guys, this has been SkyVector. This is what I use. Hope you guys found this informational. It's a great way to plan your flights. I mean, the only downside is that you can't move the plan into the programs, but that's all right. This is just a little extra cool thing you can do. Okay, guys, hope that helped. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.
Anyway, so yeah, SkyVector is pretty cool. If you can't tell. If you want to go back into the one we're really looking at, kind of just showing those things that he was saying. They actually have a few additional things in here, like cloud. There's their satellite if you want to take a peek at hurricane deal going on.
Wow.
Satellite always looks so much worse than what it really is. So the real one is the weather radar. That's going to be a lot more accurate, but you can see, you can see that eye even on that storm, now that it's hit land there. Gives you a good idea though. Now, when we were going back to, so I'll take that off for a minute. Actually, I want to see something else here. See if there's any other areas of like thunderstorms or anything going on. So going back up to this, the airmets, so the SIGMETs. Do you remember talking about SIGMETs and airmets?
Yeah.
Okay, so for large category aircraft like the ones that we'll be flight planning with, we really pretty much only care about SIGMETs. We don't care too much about airmets. So if I turn on the SIGMETs, it'll show you the current, anything currently active. You can see there's stuff off the coast down there, obviously the hurricane stuff down there. There's this convective. So these are convective SIGMETs, meaning thunderstorms. There's no other type of SIGMET out there right now. But if there was, it would be a different color, and it would tell you when you hover over it what kind it is. So it is kind of nice to have that on there. You also have outlooks. You can turn that on. You can click and read the outlook for that area that's inside the box. Convective outlook here.
That's the forecast.
Yeah. Anyway, and yeah, obviously there's the pilot reports. Turn any of that on and off. You can turn on those cities with the, you can see the METAR and the TAF. If you just hover over it, those are the current METARs and TAFs. Rock Springs, Hill Air Force Base. You zoom in further, you can get more. Obviously, the further out you are, the less it's going to show.
Time to wake up.
Oh God.
This is the
You
time
set
I had
your
to wake
wake-up
up.
alarm at noon?
I work the night shift, so I get home and go to sleep at 4.
Okay.
Oh, you were?
That's
I do that too, and I get up to 10.
When was the last time you got up at 10?
I get up every day at 10.
busted.
See, my
How do you know?
dream.
You're not even home.
Yeah, because I got a lunch or something.
Well, I'm just on the bed. The difference, I'm up.
Okay.
Awake.
So anyway, so that's mostly kind of really all we're going to probably look at today. Covered most of everything in here that's the most important. Stuff, let's see, for tomorrow. Yeah, the next day stuff will get more into the actual airspace stuff. But yeah, if you guys have questions on any of this stuff, what I kind of want you guys to do though is take Sky Vector and just, kind of just get into it and mess around with it. Just get in there, see if you can, make up some plans, like do a flight plan or something. There's obviously more elements to flight planning than obviously what you've seen. Major airports all have what are called arrival and departure routes. So you can't just say, I'm going to start at the airport and go straight to a VOR. They actually normally have an actual departure route that you follow for, 100 miles or so. And it takes you out. Like they'll have one that goes to the west, one that goes to the north, the east, any direction you want to go. And so you're actually normally supposed to file those. And then from there, you pick up where you want to go. So those are major airports though. And then same thing with arriving. So because they get so busy, they want the traffic coming in on prescribed routes from a certain distance out, like 100, 150 miles out, you have to be coming in on what's called a SID or a STAR. And a SID stands for Standard Instrument Departure Route, and a STAR stands for Standard Terminal Arrival Route. Not every airport has SID and STARs, just the major ones, the big hubs, So most of the airports we will be using in this class. So all of our stuff that we're going to do, flight planning wise, will mostly be the Western United States. So pretty much from Denver west. We'll be doing flight plans in those areas. What's that?
What is SID again?
Standard Instrument Departure. And STAR is Standard Terminal Arrival Route.
Arrival what?
Route.
Right.
On this program,
Mm-hmm.
are there more keys? Like if you were to zoom in and you're looking over at this, does it just if you move your mouse over it tell you what it is, or do you have to watch YouTube videos like that guy explaining what each thing on the chart is?
Like you mean if you were moving in here and you wanted to know like legend wise, like what something is?
Yeah.
Like some sort of a legend.
Yeah.
So if you get off of the world high and go to, so this next one, so when you're looking at this, we're zoomed in on Denver right now, but that's on the world high chart. The equivalent chart, if you were using the paper ones though, is the next one to it, the one that says en route H5. So if you click that, it'll be the same spot that you were on. The only difference is when you zoom out, it's the chart.
Oh.
It's not the thing. So when you're on the chart, if you move to one of these charts and you move over to the far right-hand side, you have all of this information. You can look at all of that in here. So it'll tell you the different types of airports, military, civil. These are the different types of VORs. There are different types. But we just refer to them all as VORs. Like they're one's called VOR DME, one's called a TAC-N or a VORTAC. Like they all do the same thing. They just have different features. Like VOR DME has distance measuring equipment. That's what DME stands for. So your plane can actually pick up the distance of how far it is away. It'll tell you exactly the miles. And then you've got NDBs. These are the ones that he was saying are kind of more going out of style. These are like what were first invented, like way back in the day. All NDBs they're basically just radio stations. They throw up an antenna and it just sends out an AM signal. Just obviously when you think of a radio, it just is blowing out in all directions, right? So when you're in a plane, in order to pick up an NDB, you have a little, what's called an ADF, and it'll tune in. It's basically it's like AM frequencies. It's not the same as like AM radio frequencies. It's usually below the 800 band basically. And below is going to be like the frequencies that you can get for NDBs, but it's the same thing like tuning into a radio station. You just if this NDB says it's 800 megahertz or whatever, you tune your ADF to that, and then you have a little thing. It just points to where the signal's coming from, and then you don't follow a jet route or anything like you do on here. You just based off where it's pointing, you turn, and you want to get it to where you're flying straight at it. And then as you get closer, obviously it's going to become more sensitive, so you just try to keep that needle straight, and that'll take you to the NDB normally. They can also use those, it's kind of crazy too, like in airplanes. I used to have a neighbor that he's retired now, but he flew like 35 years for United. But back in the day, he always used to like there's several really big AM radio stations like across the United States, like the original radio stations that started up. Anyway, they're really powerful. They're like 50,000 watt stations, but you can pick them up. Like once you get up to altitude, you can pick up these stations like all over the country, like like KSL radio up in Salt Lake is one of those big 50,000 watt station. But he would talk about how he could, as long as he was up, he could be up in Canada flying, or up even out of the Pacific, and he could tune it in because the NDB will pick up those AM radio stations. So he could tune it to 1160 AM on his ADF. And then you can actually, they have a volume thing where you can actually turn it up and you can actually hear the radio station, and he could pick up like football games and stuff. And it's kind of crazy, but it works the exact same way like an AM radio station works. It just is sending out a signal and you pick it up from the airplane. Anyway, some are still used, but very rare. And yeah, even the airplane technology is really going away from even having those instruments in there. So VOR is a little bit different because they send out specific radial frequencies. So like,
it has to be.
So like this VOR right here, Victory VOR. So when you look at a VOR, those have radials. So like the radio, or it's transmitting a signal, but it's transmitting these signals on what are called radials. And so when you pick up a VOR as compared to an NDB is your VOR receiver can identify, or it can tell which radial it's picking up from the VOR. So if you're flying, it'll give you a better idea of where you actually are, instead of like a little pointer that's just like going in circles following this needle. The VOR needle will actually, it'll show you where you're at in relation to the VOR. So you'll know immediately, I'm northwest, I'm southwest, I'm southeast, wherever, based on the radial. Because if you see these little things, like see how the jet route comes off of this, see that 284? That jet route means the way that you know that you're on that jet route, if you're at this Victory VOR and you want to be on J34, obviously it's connected to the VOR, but the way you know that you're on that jet route is that your VOR receiver, you'll know it'll be on the 284 radio. So that's how you actually know. Like if you're following this route, you come in on the 119 and you leave on the 284. So you make a little slight turn, pick up the 284, head outbound. Your VOR receiver also will tell you to and from. So it knows whether you're headed to the VOR or from the VOR. So that'll designate whether you're getting closer or moving away. So if you're flying this J34 towards Victory VOR, you should be inbound on the 119 radial. It'll say to. Once you cross over the VOR, it'll flip-flop from to to from, and then you need to find the 284 going outbound. So it's a little bit easier, a lot more precise, I guess. However, even this stuff, though, it's only a matter of a couple of years to where we're talking about VORs like we're talking about NDBs right now.
You think that flight routes will change when we get into GPS?
Yeah. There's this big thing. It's called Next Gen, that they're in the middle of designing the airspaces and to be a lot more efficient, based off of GPS RNAV technology, GPS waypoints and intersections. Obviously, a lot less costly, to use GPS than it is to upkeep this system. So eventually, sooner or later, you're going to be, like I said, you're going to be talking about VORs like we talk about NDBs now. So if you go way back, in fact, here in St. George, you actually have a little bit of aviation history here. I'll show you. The arrows, yeah. Have you been out to those?
Yeah.
Who else has been out to them? Anybody?
Like the one out by Quail?
Yeah, there's one out there, yeah. So that was obviously before there was anything.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody know what we're talking about when we say these arrows? Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, so they used to be for the mail routes. Is what they used to be back in the day, before there was NDBs, VORs, anything like that. The only way to really get around was to just, you were going off of topography, like just knowing, identifying, oh yeah, that's Pine Valley Mountain there, so I'm getting close, whatever, That's really the only way they had to do anything, and the thing is, you didn't have ways of compensating for wind. You didn't have any of that stuff, because think about it, when you're in an airplane, you are getting blown some direction, usually not. It's very rare that it's going to be exactly on your course that you want. There's one, so we're obviously looking right where we're at right now. There's one just over here. So this is, just trying to think in relation to, so this is Washington Fields Road right here, going back north. Right here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this one's just right over here. Anyway, just on top of the hill there, but you can zoom in on it. Kind of make that out right there.
Is that just like white rocks or
concrete? And they used to have on this back box right here, it used to have like a 30 to 50 foot tower that had a beacon on it that would flash. So if you're flying at night, you could see the beacon. But anyway, they, as they were flying these mail routes, and this is back in, 30s, 40s, I think is when it was. But you would find these arrows. You'd try to find the beacon, and then you'd go to where the arrow is, and then it would point the direction that you needed to fly to find the next arrow. So you would just point that direction, but they're pretty closely spaced. So there's one right there. That's just on the hill, just down right over here, going up Washington Fields Road. Coming back down, the next one before that is in Bloomington, right here off the freeway, like just up on that top of that hill, just north of the Walmart there, right next to that water tower. See it right there. A lot of people never even knew they were there. So you got that one. That's the first one really you would see like coming into Utah, I think. But then you have that one on top of the hill here, and then you've got the next one after that one would be the one over Quail Creek, which is just right here to the west. They're always kind of tough to find.
Oh, right.
Oh, it's right over here, actually. Yeah, right there. There's another one there. And some of them, are not, like this one's a lot less visible. A lot of them blend in. Some of them have just been, ruined.
That'd be hard to see from the plane, though.
Yeah. Well, back in the day when they had the towers and the beacons, a little bit easier.
Like you can see full buildings easier than you can,
Yeah. Well, and these are very outdated, obviously. But yeah, if you go up the canyon here, you can see there's somewhere along in this canyon, there's one at some point. But anyway, this one's a little bit easier to see because it's like in the middle of the trees. Yeah. But anyway, but yeah, that's what they used to fly around. So you've got, and those were really only out here in the west too, because it was a lot less, it was more uninhabited out here. But it was flying the mail routes, and the one would go lead you up the canyon. But even at that, trying to follow those around, especially if you had any sort of weather, easy to get lost. Well, that's what they did back in the day. Those were your first nav aids right there.
Right.
Yeah. So the thing did good. It held till 12:15.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too cold, right?
No, it was way better. Yeah.
The one they had a jacket.
Well, cool. That's pretty much it for today. I was planning on ending a little bit early because I got to go catch the flight up to Salt Lake.
Are you doing Salt Lake?
Going up for my cousin's mission farewell.
Oh, cool.
Where do you get called to?
He's going to Mexico City.
Spanish speaking?
Yeah.
Sweet.
I hope.
That's